What up, gentlemen?
Are we live?
We are live. Welcome to the
sure?
Grapevine Show, everybody.
Are you
Who is
sure?
here?
What's up?
Yeah, I'm sure, man.
Okay.
Sure as I can be.
All right. Cool.
So, just gonna flat out say it, man. I'm a little bit under the weather, so if you hear, I'll try to mute my mic as much as possible. But you know what? I'm gonna be here. You know why? Because it's an action item. This is an action item on my list to be here to be part of this show, and that's what we're talking about tonight. Action items. So, just saying. All right. So, guys, I'm bringing on a guest who's going to talk about action items. This guy has been putting up some major action item work. I'm sure everybody's seen it. Mr. Adam Muffich.
This guy's busier than a
The
one
show.
arm. This dude is busier than a one-arm paper hanger. I don't know
I
how
know.
he's got time to be on this show.
Adam, man, you've been 90 miles an hour, bro.
I
on
honestly, I feel like
platforms.
I'm slacking. That's like deep down, I feel like I'm a slacker.
You think so?
Yeah.
That's not how it appears. It appears you're in hammer down mode. But I will say, man, you gave me motivation. Like I'm seeing these articles fly through HVAC school, and I'm motivated to write one. You know what I mean? Like I'm sitting here thinking, like, man, I need to write a good article.
Yeah, you're just making me feel like I'm slacking.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. Like maybe it's just like because I've been under the weather. I don't know. I'm thinking like, what topic would we want to write one on? You know what I mean? Like, you ever get in that point you're like, what to write about now?
Yeah, writer's block.
Yeah, well, I guess it's like you get into that point where you're like, oh man, I really like to write something really interesting, maybe something that interests me, right? And that's where it all stems from. I'm sure, Adam, you could probably say that. It's like when you write an article, you're like, man, are you writing this article? You're like, because you're in the thick of it, and you're like, man, this is super interesting to me right now. And so I'm going to write an article about that.
Exactly. Like I feel like if you're like searching for a topic to write on, it just doesn't. It's people can tell. You know what I mean? Because I had a couple. Like I've had like one or two where it was just like, I felt like they were forced. And the ones that, when you're like, hey, I want to figure this out, or I find this fascinating. I think there's like a need for people to learn this. That's when it just flows. You know?
Yeah, just flows, man.
She's writing an article about all of us, man. You know, let's leave out the bad stuff.
Yeah,
but no, yeah, I'm with you, man. It's I think I had wrote like 2 or 3 articles for TrueTech for Bill Spohn. It's been a while since I wrote some of those, but I was still as a contractor at that time, and I just remember like finishing a job. One of my best articles I wrote that went over to TrueTech was about that church job where I ripped out the chillers and I put back VRV. Man, what a fun job that was. Huge job, a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. And it was like, I don't know, I felt monumental when I finished that job. And it was cool to write an article about it. It was just motivational, you know? I don't know. So I'm curious, man, like if I was to write an article right now, what do you guys think would be an article worth writing for myself? If you were like, hey, Chris, we want to see an article on this, what would it be? Inspire me.
What's the next big thing from TEC?
Well, I can't say that, you know.
You're going to have to write about it.
You're soon enough.
Yeah, you're going to have to write about it.
Oh, you're saying I should write about it now and just hold it till it's go time?
There you go. Right there.
Maybe so. Write about boilers. Yeah, man.
Oh,
Thanks,
boilers.
House. Yeah.
I gotta learn residential boilers first, man.
I want to see. I'm going to see Chris's article about boilers. Let's do this.
Yeah.
See,
want some
reference
heat?
Michael House. That's going to be my article right there.
Yeah. All right, man. So let's get into this topic a little bit. So this topic kind of stemmed as like a somewhat of a joke between me, Dustin Cole, and Cody Brazil when I was down in past Lafayette the other week, and I was filming them doing some work, which that video is to come. But as I'm filming, you know, I will say this: every time I go to a job site and I'm filming something, and this is like a new skill for me, but I've gotten rather decent at it. Adam could probably justify how bulldog I become when I'm like, if I'm going to film something and we're going to do a video together, like I flip a switch, man. And it's just like, hey, I need you to do this. I need you to do this now. And you said it wrong. Do it again. It's very much like pressure's on, man. It's like I'm the director and don't piss me off. It's go time. And I do that because I want the video to be very good and I want it to be very directional. And I like making content that has action items that come out of it. And if we don't have action items coming out of the content, then it's just like, I don't know. For me, it's like reading a book that's fiction, and I don't get a lot from that. I like a nonfiction book. I like a book that's giving me, direction, give me something I can know, I can apply, and I like the content to be like that too. So, when I'm filming, it's kind of funny because people laugh, but at the same time, they're like, "Oh shit, he's serious! Like he wants me to do this," and I'm like, "Let's go, let's go, let's go!" Did you get that experience, Adam? Like I would.
Yeah, he made me tuck in my shirt during the filming. I'm like, dude, I haven't tucked in my shirt for like 10 years. What are you doing here? And then who was it? At the end, we were outside, and it was either Wes from ACA, Wes Davis, or Jim Bergman. I don't remember which one it was.
So this is the video on a 310 stand?
Yeah, the 310. Yeah. They were doing their montage, shirt not tucked in. I'm like, this
the boss. He's the boss.
I need to talk to my union rep on this one.
Yeah, I think you better talk to your agent on that one, buddy.
I don't know, man. I was trying it just hits me, and it's like when you've done this a couple times and you watch somebody go through the spill and they're talking, and if you just miss one word, it just confuses the person who's going to watch that video, or through my eyes, that's what you see. So like it's an immediate stop. It's like, hey, no, we have to do this again. Stop, action item, repeat, start over. Like you can't let it slide. You can't let anything slide.
See, Chris, you did the video on the 310 stand?
Yeah, I filmed it all.
Man, bro, This guy does not brag, Adam. All right.
He was running the whole show there. He was like,
no,
Wes, do this. Bergman, you're over here, climb that ladder. He's like telling everyone what to do. He was like Scorsese.
Yeah, I'll be your friend away from filming, but if you're filming with me, I'm gonna push you pretty hard. You're gonna feel like it was a day's work. And
dude, that's awesome, man.
But that's how it comes out good, man. So it's like that's where this is going. It's action items. So I'm hanging out with Cody, and I see Cody's in the chat. Cody will probably get a kick out of this, but Cody's the one who was laughing, and he's been in the chat going, action items, because I was yelling it all day that day. And so, but let's talk about like action items, man. And like, this kind of strikes home for me when it comes to like people running their air conditioning business and talking about action items, because I feel everybody needs them. And I'd like to start at the top, and I'd like to get some comment about this. So if you own an air conditioner company, or you're the guy in charge of the entire show of the air conditioner company, you need action items, and those action items for me is process and procedures. That's what you have to work on. If you are in charge, you have to set the game plan. You have to be the guy holding the camera going, do this, do this, do this, and do it like that. And those are always going to change. But you can't change them so frequently that you piss everybody off who's working there. They have to be very strategic. And I have learned this painstakingly in my career. At the family business, I used to try to implement process and procedures, and I pissed a few people off, no doubt. I know I did. And the reason is because I would get a process and a procedure and I'd like it, and I might spend 2 months trying to plan it. But then I don't bring the team up to speed during that planning process. They don't know, right? And then I have this plan like it's all going to work out beautifully, and then I unveil it. And I'm like, and I give like a 1-day class where I bring everybody in. I give a 2-hour spiel on how this is going to work. And in my mind, I'm thinking, we're golden. This is going to fix a lot of problems. And it flops. So implementation
yeah,
and implementation time is key. And if you want a process and procedure to go over well, because I've done this in a different way, when I got older and I learned my lesson about throwing things on people, you have to really bring them in slowly and there has to be multiple times of education, repeat. But there needs to come a time where you make the switch. So,
Yeah.
for example, we went to like this hybrid model flat rate thing that I built internally for the company. Took me a few months to build it all out. And I knew that it wasn't going to go over well, first off, because everybody knows like making a huge switch like that is a mountain to climb. So we spent quite a few mornings going over it, talking about it, going over the book I had built. We made it digital as well. Like we did it a bunch of different ways. And we worked on it, and the plan was set in motion for like over 6 months. And I said, first of the year, this is what we do, and we don't go back. No matter what. Like we'll have to go dead broke before I switch
Sounds like
back.
decent implementation, if you ask me,
Like
man.
we had 6 full months to get, and these guys had the sheet copy books as reference, but they also had the digital form. And I was like, look, we got 6 months, 6 whole months to figure this out. And we're going to use some company time to go over this, right? And I could never get the guys to role play with me. And this is kind of weird to ask people to do, but I feel it's really important. And my team never really got behind me on this one, and I don't blame them. It's just weird.
What's that, role playing?
Role playing.
I hated it, man.
It's weird, man. A bunch of men sitting around and we're like talking about role playing, selling. Like, how do we make sure that I'm gonna convey this message properly to the homeowner from this new flat rate?
It doesn't feel natural either,
No,
like
it doesn't.
Talking to your service manager, like, oh, well, I'll play the homeowner. You want to be, you be the wife. Okay.
So here's the flip side of that.
I'm such a shy guy, so it's tough for me.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw the flip side of that because I've done role playing in those situations.
Yeah.
And when you role play and you become comfortable enough to go in and role play, when you hit that customer's house, there's nothing you can't handle.
Oh, I thought you meant the bedroom. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I will say this, Eric. So let me take it one step further. Here I am thinking like, man, I must look like a freaking bozo to these guys. Like, what the hell am I doing? And I'm thinking, I didn't read this from anybody. It's just an idea I had that role playing would solve the communication errors we're having with customers, which everybody has at some point. And then I got the TEC, and I started building shows, classes, and everything. And you know what the first thing I did when I built that class was? I got put in front of everybody, and I had to present that class to the team internally. I had to role play over and over again. And man, did I get firmly criticized, like beat up internally pretty hard. Like, you said this, you can't say that. You made yourself the hero. You can't be the hero in the story. Just like tons of things. And I'm thinking, holy crap.
Really?
Like, I had no idea that, educating was so much more than just delivering the information.
Right. I just rewatched
really
your presentation with Jim Bergman at the symposium last year. And I'll be honest with you, man. I mean,
not very good.
You knocked it out the park, bro. I mean, it was pretty good, man.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's tough. Not everybody could do it. It's sit up in front of a bunch of people, and just say what's on your mind and just shoot off the hip half the time. You got guys that have been in the field a lot and they're asking questions.
I'll take this to another thing with regards to role playing. When I first got into training, like professionally training, I got sent to a class from a major manufacturer that I was representing at the distributor. And it was a 3-day train the trainer class. And you had to present a little bit of their information, but it was mostly about how to manage a classroom, stand up and present a classroom, deal with problems from people in that classroom. And I see this as no different from learning how to deal with problems from a homeowner.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was one of the best things that happened to me as a trainer. I was so much more comfortable after that, walking up in front of a classroom, because later on, for that manufacturer to be able to present their trainings, I had to actually present the training to a group of people that I knew, and I had to be graded on that training by a representative of that manufacturer in order to be authorized to
wow.
even present that training.
Yeah.
And they were that tough about it, because they
I'd be
wanted to
sweating
make
bullets,
sure that their information was presented in the manner they wanted it.
So
And I think that's a valuable thing to do for technicians. Like, just like House says, you start out with kind of a script, kind of a direction. Because one of the things that I find with communications in homeowners is you've got to have the ability to adjust your presentation to convey information in a way that they understand it.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's I will say this. I haven't been doing presentations that long, truth be told. You know, I've been TC like 2 years. But one of the last ones I did, I could tell that I was losing some of the audience. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to remember which show that was, but like it was time for a break. You know what I mean? Like we were talking and the conversation was getting deep, and sometimes me and Steve team up on these, and we do it. Me and Steve have a lot of fun because Steve will go super nerd, and then I'll say, and this is how I'd use that knowledge in the industry, and then he'll go super nerd, and then I'll say, this is how I use this in the industry, and we'll go back and forth like that. And I could tell like Steve was going super nerd, and I was like, man, we got to take a break. Like even me standing to the side ready to come in, I was like, man, I need a break after that.
He's
like
so
it was just
technical.
a ton. It was a ton of knowledge.
And
it
for
was so
everybody
much-
listening, that's not a bad comment that Chris is saying.
No, not at all. I mean, it's
He's so technical.
it's
It's
super
deep.
technical, and you just got to have a breather.
Yeah.
You got to come up for air every now and then.
Let me
Let me go get a
digest
bag of chips. I'll be
Yeah.
right back.
Yeah.
No, it's fun.
It's like in the movies, they used to have the recession, the intercession half the way. Like, go get your popcorn and soda. Go to the bathroom.
I was doing a presentation for SCALT, which is in South Carolina. This was last year. And I built this whole presentation. It wasn't many slides. I had like an hour and something on my hands. And I remember I was going through the slides and I was explaining code of duct leakage and blower door. And I was showing current code. And then I was showing their code, which was behind current code. And then that part was fun. But then I noticed like the next slides I had were just boring. They were boring me to even stand up there and go over them. And I finally said, you know what? Shit on this. I was like, and they had some duct work in front of me. And I literally said, guys, I could finish this class. I was like, but truthfully, I think you get more if I just change the topic for a second. And I grabbed like a 90 elbow and I went and stood like by the glass. And I just like forgot there was a slide deck up there. And I was like basically saying like, this thing basically holds like 1 cubic foot of air. I was like, let's talk about if this cubic foot of air is inside or outside. Is this outside air or is this inside air? And I took them through the whole conversation of enthalpy and how much enthalpy is in this, 1 cubic foot of air versus inside and outside. I was like, and how impactful that is to the load calculation and why you should care. And dude, like after that class, like I got a lot of people who were like, dude, that class was like, I got some high fives. Damn near a standing ovation.
Some people like
awesome.
it when you get away from the board and you just kind of bring it real world, man. And
yeah,
you
it was.
You reminded me of I was listening to a podcast with Bill Burr and Sebastian Maniscalco. He was talking about you got to know when to read the room, man. Like when you're losing people. When you see people starting to kind of like drowse off, they might be at the Animal House all night the night before, but you got to know when to know if they're just going to sleep like Dustin Cole does, or if they're just going to sleep because you're boring as hell. You just got to know how to read people.
Yeah, I think Dustin's going to sleep for other reasons than the teacher, though.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So, Dustin is another reason. He's interested. He loves all the geeky stuff.
He is. Dustin likes to burn. When Dustin goes out of town, he burns both ends of the candle.
Yes. He burns the whole candle.
He burns the whole candle down on
Yeah.
night one. That's
He's
what he
Dustin,
does.
he's Dustin Cole. Not a lot of people can do what he does, you know. So
Yeah.
he's the brightest flame we got, and you know, so when he goes to a symposium, sometimes, you know, it might be a little hot, you know, he's just taking a break.
Yeah. There you go.
Now everybody else, you got to know how to read that. Like, are they not interested because you're going too technical? A lot of guys like hands-on, man. I like hands-on. Like, sometimes I watched your presentation you did at Kalos where you brought the TrueFlow grid with an air handler. That would engage me if I was a new technician.
Well, that show's awesome, man, because there's hands-on time at the show. That's what everybody wants to get, you know, hands-on time.
All right. All right. So we've gone down this road now. Let's bring it back to your action items. What do we action?
Okay,
Let's define what action items are.
So here's what I would say.
And we got to hear from our special guest down here. He's been like the quietest guest we've ever had on this show.
Yeah, man. All right. I'll say this and I'll let Adam comment on it. So I feel as an action item as an owner, you need to figure out, you know, first off, your action item is you need to work on process and procedures. That's really a big part of your role as company owner or company management. Like, if you're not working on process and procedures, then you're going to find yourself, I think, lost into the maybe working more in the field with the team when really you're needed to constantly course direct the way the company runs. And I think a lot of people in upper management or owners lose track of that. That's my 2 cents on that role. Adam?
I'm just excited Adam's here. That's why I'm talking over.
Just to talk a little bit about an action items, I was actually just looking it up. There's 2 books that on Audible that I downloaded recently. One is Lead the Field by Earl Nightingale. That book was powerful to me. And then another one, The Mountain Is You by Brianna West. I don't know her last name, something like that. It starts with a W. Anyway, one thing that in both of those books that I noticed, they said that, like, if you want to start accomplishing things that you thought were impossible and start, you know, basically powering through your list, is create a daily list and basically start off with 5 things that are non-negotiable that you have to get done. And you're going to work through the most important to the least important thing in your day. You know what I mean? And you're not going to stop until you're done with those 5 items. If you finish them, move on to something else that you think needs to get done. But like that way, you're basically developing a roadmap for your action items on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Prioritize them.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
writing it down is powerful. I know people joke about that, but I'm a firm believer. If you write down your action items,
I do a handwritten list
do them.
almost every other day. I do a handwritten of my clients and stuff.
So let me ask you this. All right. We talked that's like from the owner's side, right? What about from the employees in a business? Where are their action items coming from, and how do they get them, and how do they prioritize them? Does somebody else prioritize them for them? Let's talk through the whole company process here.
It's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm going to go, let's just say a vague one step down. You have, let's say, a technician that wants to move into management, and maybe you guys have dealt with this. I don't know, but you have a guy who's like maybe saying, I want to be a manager. You know, I may want to open my own business one day, or I want to be in charge of the crew. And it's like, well, when is this guy ready for that? And what does this guy need to show to me to be ready for that? And a lot of times we might make the decision based on seniority, but is that guy really the best fit? And my opinion is someone who's ready for management is someone who starts to give advice on process and procedures to the manager or owner and says, you know, if we did this, we would move faster. We'd be better. We'd have better customer communication. This would work for us. This is our business model. Hey, I did some research. And from my research, if we were to maybe segue and try this out, this might make us a better company. Like someone who's doing that level of thinking.
And you and Adam are both at one time head bosses. Let me ask you this question, which that I think is good advice. But when does it come into play where a technician says, I think so-and-so should be done, And where does it go too far where you're outshining the master? You ever hear that "don't outshine the master" type slogan? I forgot how people say it, but you don't want to outdo, the boss, right? Sometimes
from the
ego,
aspect of like work in the field, or you mean like how?
like business operations, like you're saying, like if a
I would say
technician
this.
comes to you,
I wouldn't undermine the boss from a
That- that's-
process and procedure perspective.
Yeah, but if you're trying to like grow an employee and you want them to start succeeding and they start succeeding at a level that they're surpassing you, like you're kind of doing your job as a manager, right?
okay,
Yeah, because I mean, a good manager is going to train their replacement. A good manager is training their replacement every single day or every time they work with someone. Because if you don't train your replacement, who's going to take your place when you get the chance to move up?
I used to joke with this term, and I used to say it's like being on LSD, man. You have to learn, simplify, and then delegate. That's how it's done.
I mean,
I never did LSD. I don't know.
I haven't
I can't
either.
say I have either, but
I can't
it's a
either.
good acronym. I like it.
Yeah, learn, simplify, delegate. That's
But
the role.
what I was kind of trying to get at is you never want to one up the boss. You know what I mean? So like some people take that to an ego hit. It's kind of like the episode of Sopranos when Tony walks in. When he's got a crutch and he's got his bodyguard. At one point, Tony had to turn around and knock the bodyguard out to let everybody know he's not weak.
So here's the thing, though.
You know what I mean?
If your boss doesn't want you to one up them, because I think good supervisors and good bosses should want their employees to learn and grow past where that boss's knowledge is.
I agree with you.
And if you have a boss or a supervisor that doesn't want and has a problem with their employees growing past them, that's not, in my thought process, that's not a great boss or a supervisor.
Yeah.
You gotta find a new place.
There's I don't know where I heard it from. I'm sure you guys have all heard this too. It's like, hey, as a leader, if your team fails, you fail. You should take the heat. Like, put yourself out there. I failed you because my team failed, right? But if your team succeeds and wins, it's your team that wins. It's not you that won. It's the people behind you, or next to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And always hire people that are smarter than you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what you're getting into, Michael, is a difference between someone who wants to one up the boss just to prove to the other teammates that he's smarter than the boss. And then there's people who want to one up the boss just so they maybe get recognized by the boss and maybe are looking for a bigger paycheck or something like that. There's a big difference between those two, right?
Yep.
Like you can have someone who one ups the boss and then brags about it to the team. And maybe the team and that guy have no idea what the boss is going through on his day-to-day. What process and procedures is he working on mentally in the off hours for God knows how many hours beyond the 40-hour week, where he's trying to figure out what he needs to do to make the field run more smoothly for him when he's not worried about the 40-ton DOAS that he's got to put in next week and make sure he calls the crane. The client that's calling because someone didn't explain enough the price of the change out and blah, blah, blah. And the list goes on. And then that person's also thinking about, the future of the business and what needs to happen to make it better and insurance plans and all that. So, it's easy to one up a boss if the boss is really working on process and procedures for the future of that company. Because his mind isn't technician 24/7. His mind is business owner.
The boss, the owner of the company should be technically minded, but a good company, the owner shouldn't necessarily be the brightest technical mind in that company. If that owner wants the company to succeed, in my mind, because that owner should be surrounding themselves with people that are equally as bright or maybe even brighter in some specific areas.
I agree, but I think there's nothing wrong with the owner being very, very intelligent behind the
Oh.
trade aspect.
Yeah.
You know, but I will
I-
say this: there comes a point where, and I suffered from this. Whenever you probably have, I'm just going to say, when your staff of technicians gets, I'm going to go with the number 14, right? When you get to about that many people, there comes a point where your day to day is no longer the guy who gets called because this system's not working right, and you have to be the technical guy to figure it out. You
Absolutely.
have way more action items on your day to day plate than to
Yeah.
be that guy. And at that point, someone else has to be that guy. Your
Totally
someone
agree.
in your team has to be the technical mind who answers those questions. It can't be you anymore, or else that company suffers process and procedures that need to be played on a higher role to make sure that company's successful.
See, actually, Jennifer just made a comment. She said she's also made a habit of recently paying her techs a little more than they're worth as a social experiment. I don't necessarily agree with that. I've tried that, and trust me, I have paid people like way more than they're worth, and it doesn't necessarily work out for your benefit. And I actually
Wow.
think this is a good topic to talk about action items, because instead of just like having an employee that works for you and giving them raises based on time, right? Hey, I've been here for 2 years and you get a raise now. I get to bump up because I've been here for a certain amount of time. Give them a path and action items to make it to the next level.
I would say I agree with you. So here's how my brain starts to work on that. And this kind of not fully got implemented, but me and my dad have hashed this over countless, countless times. And my dad lives by the mentality of someone works for you. And then after about 2 or 3 years, if they've done very well, they get a pretty fat raise, right? And that fat raise may be $4 an hour or something like that. And I agree with that, but I disagree with that at the same token. And I look at my wife and how she works at the hospital and what they do, and we all know inflation's a real thing, right? So someone who's working for you every year, in my opinion, if the world's gonna make your money become worth less, then you have to pay your technicians. You have to keep them up with inflation, is what I'm saying. So I
Yeah.
think there should be two different raises that happened every year. There should be an inflation raise that says, hey, I'm glad you're still with me. Let's make sure that you're maintaining status with the loss of inflation, which is average about 3%, right? A year. So like every year you get a 3% raise pretty much regardless, unless you've done something really like unless you're failing as just a baseline employee, then
Right.
maybe
Or
you could hold that
crash like 2 vans, you know,
yeah,
stuff
like
like that, you know?
depending on how you act. Like, but if you're a good
Yeah.
stewardess tech, yeah, give them the 3% raise, keep them up with inflation, and you should monitor that as an owner. You should be talking with your CPA saying, hey, what's inflation looking like? Is my team making the same amount of money? Can they go buy milk and groceries for the same amount of money they were? Like, what do I need to give them to keep their social status where it's at? Right.
Preach it, man. We were
That
just
needs,
talking about this with my buddy, man.
yeah,
Dude,
that
the
needs to
rent,
be
the
an
rent is through the roof.
established race, in my opinion, every year that takes place. And if this world gets
Yeah.
even more crazy, that may become more common, that where it may even be like a twice a year thing, right? Because we are living in some weird times. Now, that happens all the time. Then you could work on, structuring pay raises based on due diligence and how someone handles their job. In my opinion, I would keep notes per employee. Like I would have their do good list and say like, when did they have times of where that you actually wanted to stop and write something in a notebook and says that person impressed me today because of this. And then on the same note, I would have another list that says this person has failed me greatly because he did this. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, this was preventable and it should have happened. And this is that list. And this is like wow, this dude is overachieving. And I
Yeah.
think that should also be a time where it gets structured. Pick your poison once a year where you go back and you look at these lists and says, what does this person deserve?
So, and you guys are saying, like, in the area that you guys have businesses, paying them more than the average, you didn't see much of a benefit to it? Because I was just talking about this last week with a friend.
I don't want to get too.
Yeah.
I don't want. I don't want to talk about my past too much and
Yeah,
piss
yeah.
somebody off.
I would say honestly, like it becomes like an entitlement thing where they think they deserve it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But then you
right.
start looking at like, okay, well, you are capable of doing this. And then you start like in my head, I start thinking, well, you can't do this, and this.
Mhm.
What is that guy worth to me? If I found somebody that could do all this stuff, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
where's the limit on the pay? You know, if I'm already paying you way above average right now, and I know you can't really justify things that way, but what is the unicorn? How much is a unicorn worth to a company? I don't know.
That's a
I
good
think
question,
a unicorn is worth a lot, but it depends on the attitude of the unicorn. Personally, I think if a unicorn is and what I'm thinking when you mean unicorn, you mean somebody who can fix anything they touch, just beautiful craftsman, right? But if that person also pisses everybody off in the company, personally, that person has to go.
bro.
That's
The unicorn's got to play well with others.
I'm going to disagree with that terminology of using that person as a unicorn, because a unicorn
I
is
agree.
also someone that
It's a
works
mythical
well
piece.
with the entire team as well as works with the customers. That's
I agree. That's the real unicorn.
that's the real
That's the
unicorn right there.
Yeah.
Technical competency only gets you so far when you have to interface with other people around you.
Yeah. You're not doing install service,
Which
building science, and then you're going to go
It's-
and talk shit behind everybody's back and get the whole crew.
if
You
you
know,
noticed it, I don't know if you guys have run into this though. Like a lot of times I've seen like people that are really, have a technical mindset, they might be a little bit socially awkward and they might not be, the guy who's like outgoing to a customer or whatever else, that's
a
kind of what I've
little
seen.
spectrum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let me
Like
ask you a question.
Einstein couldn't tie his own shoes type deal. Yeah.
Would you rather have a company full of 10 guys who were technically the best in the world, but came to work, pissed off at each other and, like weren't not good minglers, not awesome with the customers? Or would you rather have 10 technicians who were amazing with customers, decently technically sound, who had to reach out from time to time, but, failed from time to time? What kind of company would you rather run? Would you rather 10 solid guys or 10 guys who were just super pleasant to be around?
I think I'd rather have like a mixture of them, because like you could always take the super technical guy and push him in the back and be like, hey, I'll talk to you, Mrs. Homeowner, right now. And, we'll walk through everything and let that guy keep his head down over in the bushes over there. He's just going to take care of this for us. You know what I mean? You can always run it like that a little bit.
But
if don't get me a Gatorade from a truck.
To the flip side of that though, Adam, if you have that type of person that you have to be out there and manage that person all the time, are they worth nearly as much?
That's true.
There goes Eric again.
Yeah.
Because now you're the
throws us to
boss,
those loops.
like you in your position, you're the boss of the company. You should be running that company, but now you're out here hand holding a technician and a homeowner because you can't send that technician out by themselves to do a good job. Now, I don't care how good a technician is. I've worked with some phenomenal technicians and every one of them has to reach out for help sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm like the worst at this too, to be honest with you. Like my Chris says the same thing. Chris Stevens says the same thing. Like I think we're both in the same spot. Like we're type A personality, whatever. And like I like things done a certain way. Chris likes things done like I'm like the worst company owner. Like I am not good at letting go of the reins. And
You're not the only one, brother.
Yeah. You're not the only one.
It's a very common thing.
Yeah.
It's like your baby, and then you got all these guys running around and they're like children,
So let me ask you something, Adam. When you say you have a hard time letting go of the reins, do you ever let your guys have the big win? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's say you put in this brand new job and this job just like, it's freaking awesome. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's one of those, like, if there was ever a resume full of pictures, this would be in it. Do you let those guys start it up, talk to the homeowner, explain it, you know what I'm saying? And like, let them have the win of like, I'm finishing this job.
actually the one guy who works for me, Nate, he'll frequently talk to the homeowners, and he like enjoys it. Like a lot of times I'll like go for it, man. I freaking don't. Like that's something that, you enjoy more than I do, go for it,
Yeah.
But
I-
I've been
I
trying to
enjoy
work on
talking
it
to
a little
people.
bit more. Like we're actually doing a project. One of the two, we have like two in-depth projects going on right now. One is a remodel of a Frank Lloyd Wright house, and he actually, like, in the beginning I was like micromanaging things. I'm like, oh my god, we have to watch every little detail, you know what I mean? And then I got to the point where I'm like, go for it. And I let him run by himself 2 days in a row, and he's doing great on this job. So yeah, it's just hard to do that, you know what I mean? For me, I struggle with it.
It's the same thing when I try to teach my son how to drive. Like, when are you going to let him? Go ahead.
It's a character flaw. You know,
I think it's
something I need to work on.
I think I've experienced this many times, and this is where I had to let go. You show up to an install and you look at this install and you go, damn it, like that's not what I wanted. but then you have to stop and look at it and go, what's wrong with it? It may not be what I wanted, and it's not how I would have done it, but the way they did it is not broken.
And
It's just
the way you
different.
could come off as a boss, it will break their week, like hearing that from the boss.
Yeah.
Especially if it's something like cosmetic.
Drain
like you
lines
said.
I used to be so adamant about drain lines, like super big time. I like my installs had to be so high off the ground because everything's like horizontal here. It had to be so high off the ground. I used to like to come out. I used to like mount a T vertical with a clean out at the top. That way I could, I was very adamant about that. And I tried to preach it, but a lot of guys, they were just like, hey man, look, like other things during this install wasn't going to make that fit. So we ran the drain line out straight. We put in like an inline SS1 or SS3 inline, and that's just how we rolled. And I'm just thinking, damn it, that's not what I wanted. You know what I mean? But it's not broken.
Well, yeah, you're
It's
right.
gonna work.
Because like just because it's not your way doesn't mean it's not an okay way, right?
Right. Yeah. It's like at the end of the day, there was no disservice done to the customer.
Right.
And maybe I'm being way over anal attentive to this situation, and like I was just being over the top.
Well,
and definitely be accused of being over the top way too much.
Sometimes there's two things right there to me. One, do you have a process and procedure that this is how drain lines get done if it's possible to fit that in there?
Well, this
action items.
I would say so. Here's what I would say: yes, but not on paper. It's
if it ain't on paper, it ain't a process and procedure.
It was taught in the back of the shop as this is what we would like to see happen, but it's not. It wasn't exactly like enforced in saying, "Hey, this is what we want every time."
Eric is right. You need action items.
That's right.
So, and number two, I mean, if it can't be the way that you wanted it, like. We had a way at the first company I worked at, we used these tees that had a red screw-in cap on one side of it for clean out tees. And almost every coil we had a clean out tee on it. So you could go straight in and clean the outlet of that coil out. You could look in there and physically see all the way into the coil to make an inspection.
I like that.
And then we also had one at the bottom because we made all of our traps. We also put a clean out at the bottom of the trap so you could unscrew that plug, right? It had just a little red pipe plug in there. I think it was a 1/2-inch pipe plug. And clean that trap out and flush it all out, run a brush or whatever up in there and clean it out. That was our standard. Now, we only had one installer and he did everything the same way because that's how they figured out how to do it. And it worked really, really well. And we had almost no problems. But like there wasn't a policy and procedure because there was only one person doing it. If we'd have had to have more people, if we had more people doing it, we'd have had it, written down somewhere.
Yeah.
But the other piece is on that, when we didn't have the ability to do that, something else got done. And like you just kind of alluded to there, you got to have your eye on the final goal. Does it meet that final goal? And does it accomplish what we wanted to do, which was to be able to maintain the drain and drain the water away from the equipment? So I think a manager has to do both. Like they have to have that policy and procedure in place, but sometimes it's got to be a little flexible, especially in HVAC, because how many houses and installs have we ever run across that are identically the same on every single house?
Right, exactly. And you know what would be funny? Making this like action items in the warehouse and having only one installer. It'd be like,
What?
Yeah.
I'll be honest. We
that
had a lot of that at my first company, and they had a very amazing process for taking parts out of the warehouse, bringing them back in. We had what we call install kits, and whenever a job,
it's a go bag for an installer.
well, we had them in plastic tubs, but we had them for air conditioners, gas furnaces, and then a venting kit for depending on if we were doing 2 or 3 inch venting for a furnace. And it basically had essentially everything you needed in there. So then we would take that out to the job site, use all the parts out of it, and bring the tote back to the warehouse. And when we brought it back into the warehouse, all you did was inventory what was left. And the difference between what was put in that kit to start with versus what was left was what you charged to the job.
Oh, wow.
So going back to what Adam was talking about, I think, Adam, you were hitting on this, but something I want to say like about company culture, which is kind of where kind of segue into a little bit. It's like maybe not so much the pay, but like what really gets people, I think, a little motivated. If you're in charge and you can do something to make your guys their life easier in the field. And this is something we did that worked well. Like when we were doing more installs, we went out and bought like an install trailer because it was just becoming more and more. And we started to stock this trailer heavily. Like you name it, you had it. You might have had 3 of everything. We had flue pipe, like a box of 5-inch pieces, 4-inch pieces, 3-foot pieces, 1-foot adapters. We stacked that trailer deep. Duct ties, mastic, you name it, it was all there.
I like it, man. My buddy just started doing that. It's really cool.
And we had now this was the fight I had with The Office. The Office liked to track everything. Like we got to the point we counted sticks of solder. Yeah, being used on the job because now hear me out. Because we were we were time and material, and we build everything accordingly to time and material.
Yeah,
and solder started to get expensive, right?
You're gonna start counting 5/16 screws at the top. God,
that's where my mind was with it too. But that's what happens when you let The Office start dictating a little too much about what should happen.
How much glue did you use today on a PVC?
Right. So there was a lot of going back and forth about this shop trailer. And it's like, well, if we have this shop trailer, we're not going to know what they use. We're going to blah, blah, blah. And I finally, my answer to this was, we will stop tracking inventory. Like anything from a contactor down, you name it. And we carried a lot of stuff. I said, we no longer need to track that. I said, because if I don't trust my guys to be deemed worthy not to steal, then they shouldn't be here anyway. And I don't need to worry about that aspect of it. I get the billing side of it.
And if you pay your guys good enough, they don't have to steal from the truck, right? And that's when Chris hired a bunch of guys from church.
So we had we dropped tracking inventory, which the guys loved because they hated having to fill out getting people to fill out an invoice alone is a pain in the ass. But then having to tell them that they have to write down everything they used because we were time material. Hey, I used 2/6 of starter, blah, 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 blah. Like the writing
sounds like they're getting punished.
Yeah, it's a pain in the butt. Yeah. But when you flat rate everything, and my process and procedure to fix all this was, we're going to go flat rate. My book's going to have a code for every job you can do. This was all custom built because I couldn't find one that I liked that would just segue to make everybody happy. So I wrote my own codes for my own jobs, and the code had all the material built into it as a job, right? And you might get 3 codes, 4 codes, 6 codes built to this job. And then that tied to eliminating tracking the warranty, the inventory. man, that allowed me to get a shop trailer. Goes to the job, and when the guys are installing, they're just grabbing and going, grabbing and going, grabbing and going, right? Doing their job.
Yeah.
Job's done. Nobody has to track anything. You write down your 6 codes or whatever, and you turn in your invoice.
Or you could just charge $5,000 more than every other company and just be done with it, you know?
Well, when you stop and you
It's a
look
heck with
at your inventory, so there was a lot of piss and matching going on in our family business over this. But then when you stop and look at that point, what the company is generating for gross revenue a year, and it's in the multi-millions, and you're looking at your inventory that you buy for the year, and let's just say it's $25,000 of hard cost material, you have to give it the, what the fuck? Like, who cares about the inventory cost at this point? It is a super minute amount of money. If someone needs to jack a contactor off the truck because their house broke, jack it, man. I don't care. What's that contactor cost me? Not enough to matter to worry about
it more than you do.
Because the time you spend them inventorying it is costing you more money than if somebody jacks a contactor.
It's like when a guy broke into my car when I was in high school. I was like, well, I guess he needed that Hoobastank CD more than I do. You know, go ahead. You know, you know. And it goes my Incubus CD. You know,
but I will say this: good record keeping is what gets you there, right? Having an office that has tracked it long enough to where you can see the year-to-year purchases of what you're spending on inventory allowed that decision to come to life, because you can now compare that expense to the gross revenue, to the net revenue, to see if it matters enough to worry about tracking it and adjusting the business model. So that's the stuff that keeps owners up at night, right?
Yeah. Sounds like I don't want to own a 10-van business.
All right. So we've gone through a lot here. We talked about owners. We're talking about technicians that maybe want to move up into management. What are we talking about technicians that say they don't want to move up into management? They just want to be a really good technician. What are some action items they can have, and where should they be looking for those action items from?
They should be reading Adam's articles.
Yeah. Articles, but they could be reading these books right here. I mean, I think that like there's so much information online, and you should probably look to your superiors, your managers, or whatever. Like, hey, what do I need to do to grow? Right?
Ask questions, right?
You have to want to learn, and you have to want to grow, right?
I would say this: too many people that I have seen in my lifetime who were installers, and they were great installers. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that, but to become a well-rounded technician, being able to do startups and do service and be a good installer makes you more valuable. And I've seen way too many people who were technicians who were doing the troubleshooting and startups jump in front of the install team before the install team had a chance to do their own startup. And they do that because they know that's how they hold their position in place in the company and keep the installers where they're at in their part of the company, right? And so a lot of, I don't know, maybe it's just like the people I've been exposed to, but installers are more passive aggressive. They won't argue with you. They're not going to get in that fight. They're like, hey man, whatever, you want to start it up, be that way. That's fine. I mean, I would have loved to have tried it, but I'm not going to have this dispute with you.
I could agree with that. Yeah.
But
I think that may have been the installers you had.
Well, I think that the installers should argue that point and say, why are you here? Like, because I was told I'm going to get to fire this off and I'm going to get to trim the charge and I'm doing all this. Now, if you want to be here, great. You can stand behind me and make sure I do it right, because you should be educating me on how to do this so I can grow. But they don't argue that fact.
Sometimes I think you need to, you have to ask for your shot, right?
Yes. I think that's what I'm getting at. Yeah. You got to ask for your shot, and it's okay if you fail. It's okay if you fail 100 times in a row, but having the initiative to keep going for it.
I'm going to say that really depends on how a company delineates tasks, right? Because that's going to change from company to company, what they expect from their installers or what they expect from startup versus a repair technician. If you have a really small company, you might wear every single hat in the company.
Well,
Even as
what
a technician or an installer, you might wear all of those hats. But
Yeah.
if you have a large company, like you're talking about a more commercial company, things like that, yeah, you may have somebody that says, okay, this is the startup tech, this is the install tech, however you're going to do it. And that really depends on, and I know installers that have had the chance. Companies are like, hey, do you want to be a technician? And the installers are like, no, I just want to be an installer. I like what I do. I don't want to do anywhere else. I want to do this really, really well.
Well,
to answer that question, I was in that kind of position about 8 years ago. And I started listening to Stephen Reardon on YouTube, getting into wireless Bluetooth technology for tools, listen to Papa Spone and True Tech Tools, listen to his videos, and then getting hooked up with a group, man. If it's the Overtime group, if it's our group, the Grapevine, and having people like HVAC school like encourage you to push. I think, to answer your question, Eric, I think these Facebook groups really help guys grow, man. Like HVAC chicks, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, it depends on what a person wants to do.
Yeah.
I never understood the separation between installers, service techs, and I was not a huge company with me and my dad and family.
It's like two different countries, bro.
But
it's weird.
When you came on board, it was well understood that we were all utility players. Whatever the job deemed was that day, that's what we did. I mean,
really?
Yeah, like if you came on board, you might have been a residential installer today, and you may be on VRV service tomorrow, and you may not be ready for VRV service, but you're going and you're going to go with the other guy, and you're going to get exposed
with a lot of
to
companies,
it.
Personally, I haven't been with a lot of companies, but it's like
I haven't either.
It's like, the installer crew's Canada, and service guys are basically like America. It's like two different countries completely.
I think like smaller companies, you're kind of forced to throw people in random positions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, the larger company that I worked for, we had service techs and we had what we called a project crew, right? And they worked on the projects. It wasn't installers per se; it was the project crew, because maybe they were setting a rooftop, maybe they were doing duct work, maybe they were putting in a kitchen or something like that, kitchen equipment. So there was all kinds of different stuff they did. And they just called that the project crew, which I thought was a little bit of a different mindset from a naming aspect to me.
Well, here's what I'll say. Cool. I feel like installers get a bad rap in our trade, and I don't understand why. When we were running Hughes, we were very good about this, I would say. Like, installs was our big ticket item for us. I don't understand why companies go for their, how do I say this? Installers have gotten a bad rap, like they're not worthy of being service techs, but yet you're going to put them on the most high price ticket item.
Dude,
I don't get that.
That's the most important. That's like super important in the lifetime of that equipment. You know what I mean?
Bingo. Yeah. And you're I don't understand it. Like when we ran a company,
I don't get it, man.
We would put like every install got one super top level guy at least, if not two, to go do that install. And y'all would also think I'm nuts, but every install we did was typically a minimum of 3 people. Sometimes 4.
Really?
Yeah. And we charged a great deal of money to do an install, and we were profitable, and we charged a premium. And, rarely did you get 2 guys on an install. If it was a 2-person install, it was a closet unit install, maybe no ductwork, new line set, and these guys were bad to the bone, right? They both were solid.
But I think you're right, man. Like nobody's ever said like, hey, I got a problem at my house, my personal house, right? And somebody goes, hey, let me get my head installer on it. He can fix what's going on. It's always a service guy. Yeah. We should have like an installer. I think you're right, man. Installers should be way more knowledgeable than a service guy.
Nah, I wouldn't say more. I'm going to say they need to know different things. Now, I know
Yeah.
one company here locally to me that they pay their install techs higher as much or more, some of them, than their service techs, because as the owner told me one time, he said, my install techs make me more money than my service techs do.
Right.
Yeah, and then you know what I find really interesting is the VRF game. Like, let me tell you something. The guys who are out there installing this stuff correctly,
Yeah. Whatever.
that takes
with that VRF stuff.
that is a no joke game right there. Like, that takes some knowledge. Like, the games change differently. You have to do things a lot
bro,
differently.
you need a laptop, right? Am I right or no?
Well, for startup, yeah. I mean, if you want to do a commission, you're going to see all the parameters of everything from your laptop hooking up like a D checker or something. But like, just what you need to know to install that equipment, right? There's a lot of things during that install that are different than traditional air conditioning, like how you pipe the refrigerant. There's a lot of rules in that. You can't have any big traps or anything anywhere. You can't have places where oil to be captured. While like traditionally, you know, back in the day, let's say you'd run a line up a wall, you might put a trap every so many feet to carry the oil back up. In VRV, you can't put a trap anywhere. And if you're running copper for, let's say, 3-story building up and down, it's kind of, you got to think about it. You got to be like, man, I got to get this line down. This main's got to go down. I can't belly it anywhere.
We had Ralph Wolf call me, man.
With VRV and VRF, you got to have a good drawing, which means you got to have somebody lay the whole thing out from.
True, but a good drawing isn't going to always solve your problems, because there's always going to be course correction, and there should be meetings for that. There should be meetings for that, but those meetings don't always happen.
You start out with a good drawing, and if anything doesn't work on that drawing when you get in the field, you have to send it back for redesign.
I will argue that point.
Well, you should.
I would argue that point. What if the person who drew the drawing is not who you think it is? What if I drew the drawing for that building? Or what if I'm working hand in hand with the engineer and we drew that drawing for the building?
Okay.
Like, I guess what I'm saying is in a perfect world, you're right. But that's in a perfect world, and big construction projects don't work like that all the time.
What I'm saying is, you don't just make a random change to a VRV or VRF job. It needs to be run back through the software for that manufacturer, for the design software for that manufacturer.
Unless you have a really amazing installer who understands it very, very well and makes the change because he knows he can shrink the line set length based on the install. And then he sends the updates to the team later to say, course correct for this. I made a decision in the field because we had to go. Then maybe. I'm okay with it because he understands why he's doing it.
Yeah, maybe. But you can get yourself in a lot of trouble.
Stick to residential.
You get yourself in a lot of trouble real fast.
You can, but here's what I'll tell you. When you're on a job that big, you typically have the head honcho of every company. You've got the HVAC top guy, the plumbing top guy, the electrician top guy. You've got the superintendent, which you hope is a really cool guy who gets along with those 3 guys and maybe some more, and they work together. Now, if everybody's at each other's throats, this is how jobs get stalled out big time or move super, super fast, is this right here. If
and this
those
job
companies
is not getting done in Florida, that's what you mean.
Yeah. Now, if that HVAC guy and the superintendent's being a total dick, this is what's going to happen. I'm putting the brakes on. We're going to go to lunch. We'll just work this out when we get it figured out. You need to call everybody in for a meeting because I can't do that because this is in the way. Breaks, and everybody comes to a screeching halt. Nobody works together because maybe the superintendent's not a nice guy and he's, bitching about something he shouldn't be bitching about. I've seen this. But if everybody on the team's working together, the HVAC guy might just, sound the alarm and say, hey, everybody meet downstairs in just a second. They go meet and say, hey, look, here's the deal. I'm going to change this. This will work. Is this going to affect you? Is this going to affect you? Is this going to affect you? They bust out the drawings and everybody goes thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. All right, run it. And that's how jobs keep moving fast without having to go through the litigation. And it all depends on personality. If you have good personality with the people on the job and you're a good communicator and you're not pissing everybody off, that job rolls. And that installer has the ability to make some course corrections that are good for the job and move things along. But if the personalities on the jobs are bad, that job goes to a screeching halt, and you might lose a whole day.
Yeah.
Getting back to the action items, I want to know what Adam's doing next, man, because I saw he did an article in
I was
What was
just
the
gonna
paper?
I was gonna relate this to like residential a little bit too, because like I've been kind of like surrounding myself with ductwork and duct design, airflow, and all that. And this could kind of go into a topic on duct design, residential wise, right? You have like
right.
somebody that does a duct layout for you. The installers get in there and hey, there's a beam right here, there's a rafter right here. What do I do? I can't put the air handler here. Am I going to make a judgment call?
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, and some of that stuff in the field with airflow, in my opinion, is slightly more forgiving than.
I think that depends on the designer.
we were actually just talking. Me and Chris we were talking about like
Yeah,
there
it
are
can-
times where there's like so much room for air that it doesn't. It's
Yeah.
uncanny. But then there's other times where it's like,
Now this circles back to a great conversation, because if you have the designer of the company who designs, let's say through ACA practices, and also is smart enough to build in a little bit of buffer, where what I mean by that is ducts get a little bit bigger. There's room for error, if that's what you want to call it. Hey, I'm going to add a 90 to get around this joist, like Adam's saying. Now, let's just say the designer, maybe also the owner of the company, understands that. Then you have the head guy who's running the project. He may also understand that. You know what I'm saying? And so his ability to say, hey, we're going to course correct to get around this joist, because he understands that there's a little bit of balancing that may come at the end of this job, and that's okay. The ducts are one size bigger than they need be. Boom. There you go. Right. But if you have a designer.
Alex Meany was saying, like,
so here's your action item from all of this.
Yeah. Action item.
Know what the heck you're working on and how to work with it when you're installing it, so that it gets installed and works as it was designed.
know the rules and why they're rules, so you know when you could break them.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to add, maybe we'll go around the table and then we'll close the show. Here's my thing. If you go to a training, and I think you should, as a technician, you should always have a class in mind you want to go see, period. If you've just finished a class, you should have your target on what the next class you want to go to is, even if it's a year away. You should know what you want to learn next. But when you go to that class, you should be asking yourself, while you're at that class, what am I going to bring back with me for knowledge that I can share with the team? And you should share it with the team. That makes you just like a team player, and everybody respects the team player. That's my action item.
Nice.
I love it, man. I love it. I think, like I said before, these Facebook groups, man, getting plugged in. I mean, it keeps you motivated to push forward to the next level, not stay stagnant in this trade. I mean, before I met all you guys, I was ready to quit, man. I was ready to quit HVAC, man. I'll be honest with you. I don't say that,
You don't say that
I don't really like to say that often, but I got stagnant in the trade. I was at a point where I was kind of getting tired of it. I was at like what was that, 16-year mark or something like that. I wasn't growing. And, I discovered building performance. So that was a rabbit hole and a half. Duct design, load calcs.
Right. Adam, you want to say anything to take us out, man?
I would say, like, me personally, my immediate action item that I try to work on is time management and trying to stay on top of my upcoming tasks. And I mentioned this before the show. You guys look it up. There's something called the Eisenhower matrix, where it's like 4 boxes, and you're trying to delegate, how much time you're spending in each box. And that's where I'm focusing right now, is trying to, divvy up my time a little bit.
Yeah.
Solid, man.
You get
Awesome.
spread thin quick, man.
All right, guys. Until next week.
Yeah.